Hello, and welcome to the Brown Initiative for Discipleship and Evangelism. My name is Ethan Brown, and this is Bide. This video is being produced in cooperation with the Partnership Program at the Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary, where I am a student in the Doctor of Ministry program in Outreach and Discipleship. If you'd like to learn more about the Partnership Program, if you'd like to become one of my partners, I'll place information about that in the description of this video below. Today, I'm going to open with with a book recommendation and then a couple of other book mentions. I don't necessarily recommend the latter two books, not because they're awful. They tend to be Marxian and they're old sociology, but they're very dense and they're not a lot of fun to read. So read them if you want, but they're tough. But the first one's very good. It's by Sam Chan, and it's called Evangelism in a Skeptical World. The second two books are by a sociologist named Peter Berger. The first one he wrote with a guy named Thomas Luckman, and it's called The Social Construction of Reality. And the second one was Peter Berger's alone, and it's called The Sacred Canopy. Let me just go ahead and tell you these books are where I'm getting these ideas, and then I want to throw a thought experiment at you. I'm going to put a series of images in front of you, and I want you to think in your mind, is this a real thing or not? A little game to play. Is it a thing or is it not a thing? So, if you're playing and not being able to watch the imagery, I'll go ahead and let you know what's on the screen. So, go. Is that a thing? It's a unicorn. Is a unicorn a thing? Yes? No? Maybe? How about this? This is a tiger. Is a tiger a thing? Have you ever seen one? Is that a thing? How about this? This is a biblically accurate angel. How about instead of the biblically accurate version, we'll go ahead and look at a Hallmark version. But is an angel a thing? Is that a thing? Do they exist? How about this? This is a vampire. Is that a thing? Are they real? How about this? This is an elf. Is that a thing or not a thing? How about this? This is a demon. Or how do you represent a demon? I don't know, but this is an image to represent a demon. Is that a thing or not? Okay, that's enough. So the reason for this little thought experiment that we just had is to bring to you and put in front of you a list of things that in the Western world were once considered real, and that some of them are still considered real and others are not. And when you saw it, you immediately thought, okay, that's a mythical creature, or that's an animal, or well, that's something that's in my religion, because that's kind of the categories I threw at you. You thought of these things and you thought, okay, well, some of them, yeah, I believe are real. Some of them I've seen at a zoo, so I know that's real. And some of them are not. But how did you make the decisions? How did you choose from among them? Because chances are pretty good you don't have a tiger in your living room. And yet everyone watching this video believes in tigers. There may or may not be a demon in your living room. How would you know? You can't taste it, can't smell it, touch it, feel it, see it. So how do you know that that thing is or is not there? In fact, how do you know it's real? But if you have a certain religious set of convictions, then you absolutely believe a demon is real. You believe an angel is real. But you're not so sure about unicorns. In fact, you're pretty sure, no, there aren't any unicorns. There is no Bigfoot. Elves are not a thing. But you realize that if you go back, you wind the clock of time back, say 500-600 years, and absolutely everything on the list that I just gave you is accepted as a real creature. It's part of God's creation. It's a real thing. So why do you believe in them and why do you not? Well, that's what gets us to Chan and to Berger and their ideas. And I'm going to focus in on just one idea that is found in those books. In The Social Construction of Reality and The Sacred Canopy, the argument that they're doing is that we come to determine what is real and what is not based on what we are socialized into believing. That human beings, to a certain extent, we have what's called basic information, meaning I encounter it, therefore I believe it's real. If my senses set it off, then I think it's a real thing. So the world that I'm living in right now includes the iPhone I'm talking to, and I know that there's a table right here. My senses tell me that's real. So basic information is the stuff I'm just taking in right now. And then there's, the kind of universe that I live in. Well, now my senses tell me some of that, like the blue sky during the daytime and the dark sky at night. It tells me something about the universe that I live in. But it doesn't tell me that the stars that I'm looking at are light years away and that the light that came from those stars started its journey to my eyeball. The photons that got fired out of those burning balls of gas started the journey to my eyeball like 1,000+ years ago, or even longer ago than that. No, the night sky that I see doesn't tell me that, but the historical worldview I'm a part of does. So I'm in a place in time and in the Western world where science has made these discoveries. We've got the Hubble, telescope that's looking off and seeing light and seeing the red shift in light that tells me that the universe is expanding and it's getting further away. At least that's what I'm led to believe, that the light is like a Doppler effect. I accept all those things as real. I accept medical science as real. If I had a deep pain in my side, actually it would be this side, but I would head in to the hospital because I would want someone to pick up a knife and cut into my body to remove the inflamed appendix. Because if I had that kind of pain, I'd think, I'm having an appendicitis. And if I don't have someone stab me with a knife, I'm going to die. Usually, if someone stabs me with a knife, that scares me. Or, if they threaten to stab me with a knife, I'm terrified. But I would actually go and let someone do that to me and want them to do that to me because I know I've got a problem inside my body. There's a problem with my body. And it's caused by bacteria and an inflammation of an infection that if it ruptures, I'm going to get septic, I'm going to die. How do I know all that? I don't really know how I know all that. It's just part of the social construction of reality that I function inside of. I live in a world where all of those things are just base information we share together. We believe this together. We believe in medical science together. So since you believe all that and they believe all that, I believe all that, and I think that's true. I think that's real. You realize that the reality that we exist in could give you other answers. I say that because if you travel around the world, you will encounter people who do not believe any of that. That if you had a terrible pain in your side, the idea of someone stabbing you with a knife sounds insane. What you clearly have is a demonic attack. You need to go see a particular kind of witch doctor who will use a certain kind of spell and an amulet and power to try and drive the evil spirit from your body. That there is a social problem in the village and that needs to be resolved. And when that gets resolved, my illness will get better. That kind of thinking, it's very real. Why do people think that? I mean, it's so obviously a virus or a bacteria. Why would they think these things would cause problems in our bodies? Why would they think spirits that aren't real would cause problems in our body? Well, for their understanding, you see, the social network that they're a part of Well, it tells them that all of that is, in fact, very real. Now, Sam Chan is the first place that I ever encountered this idea, and he gives credit to Peter Berger for it. But what we're talking about here is a kind of mental construct, a kind of structure that we have in our minds. It's called a plausibility structure. And you can think of it like a set of gates. Those gates are either going to let an idea come in or they're going to keep that idea out. They don't want to just have anything come in. After all, you don't want to believe in the boogeyman when you're 35. There comes a point where an idea that might be acceptable as a child, whose imagination and its connection with reality has not been shaped to the point where that concept is kept out by their plausibility structure. It's okay for that kid to believe in that monster, a werewolf, a ghoul, a vampire, the boogeyman. It's normal for them to believe it because they haven't got a structure that keeps it out. And if somebody tells them it's real, their gates are very broad to let in a very large amount of information. But over time, we become socialized, and we come to accept an increasingly narrow understanding of the world as it is. Our gates close to the point where I'm not scared by monsters really anymore. The idea of a zombie it's maybe an interesting entertainment thing, but it's not really gonna frighten me, the way that maybe a kidnapper might, because that one's real and this one's not. Okay. So how do plausibility structures function, and what do they have to do with evangelism? Well, realistically, plausibility structures are functional whether an idea is good or bad. That God has designed us to be social animals that learn from one another and that accept reality based on the belief system of one another. If I believe something is true and that person does and that person does and that person does, and you have a relationship with all of us, then the relationships that we're a part of build your plausibility structures. We contribute to them at the very least. And you build what you find acceptable or non-acceptable based on those relationships. So when someone comes and really is important to you, but they believe something very different from you, it's really uncomfortable because it challenges the plausibility structure that you've built. What's real and what's not? What's valid and what's not? What's an acceptable, digestible concept that I can take in or not? Well, it becomes uncomfortable because those structures, they're not things that I examine. That once they're built, they just function on their own. Like a pair of glasses, I don't look at them, I look through them. So taking in a concept gets reinforced when I'm a part of a group. When I've got somebody that I care about and that cares about me and they believe something different, then suddenly my plausibility structure comes into view. And I start asking myself, is there a reason to believe that or not? Now, to discuss it specifically with evangelism, Sam Chan drew these ideas from Peter Berger in order to think about, okay, how do group dynamics influence evangelistic success? He's looking at it and saying, okay, well, if a group of people come together, does that help a person to come to believe things that they start out not believing? The example that he gave in his book is, imagine that you are, having a nice evening sitting on your back porch, and suddenly a spaceship floats down and it lands next to you, and a little green man comes out of a ramp and says, "Hey, come with me." And so you get up and you go with him. You get on the spaceship, but they travel to one of the moons of Saturn, and they do it with a faster-than-light drive, so it just takes a second or two to get there. You get to Saturn, and you are welcomed into this very large banquet hall where there's a meal going on, and you're fed the most amazing food you've ever had in your life. You have a delightful time. The evening passes far too quickly. It's time to get back on the spaceship. You head home, and on your way home, you pass through a time portal that causes the event not to have taken any time. So that from the time that you travel from that portal back to Earth is about 3 minutes, and that's all that passed from the time that you climbed onto the spaceship until the time that you're climbing off to go back to your home. So you get back home, you have all these memories of an event that you can't tangibly prove, but you know they happened. You know it happened to you because you experienced it. Now, say you sat down with me and you're trying to explain the event that you had, that evening that you had on that moon far, far away. And I'm hearing about this from you. Okay. Well, am I going to believe that or not? Or if I had the experience, would you believe that or not? Well, no, probably not, because it would challenge all of your plausibility structures. It would run up against your experience of reality, and you would immediately start saying, okay, something happened to you, but I think maybe you're having a break, and you need a break. You need some time off in a nice little mansion where people go to rethink their experience of aliens until they come to realize that didn't happen. That's what you need. Because I would immediately start thinking there's something wrong with your mind. You're having hallucinations. You're having some sort of experience. Or if I had that experience, I was trying to tell you about it. If it's just the two of us, you'd be like, no, okay, all right. It just wouldn't seem acceptable or believable. It's not a concept that's easily digestible. Or in Berger's ideas, it wouldn't get through the gates of your plausibility structure. But imagine you and I are having this conversation, and we're sitting at TGI Fridays, right? We're having, their chicken, whatever that's called, the little dipper things, and you're telling me about this, and I'm hearing about it, and I'm going, okay, right, and then suddenly at the next table, someone says, hey, excuse me, I thought I recognized you. You were there, weren't you? And, you look up at this person and go, oh, yeah, I saw you. You looked familiar. Yeah, we went to Alpha Centauri or whatever, right? We went there, and wasn't the, whatever that meat was, wasn't that amazing? Now, I'm going to be sitting here going, okay, shared delusion, this is creepy. But then imagine a third person, maybe the server, walks up and goes, I actually learned this recipe there, and they start talking, and suddenly the group of you are sharing about an experience that you've had that challenges my plausibility structure entirely. And for me, I can't believe it, except I'm suddenly part of a group of people that have a shared plausibility structure because they have a shared experience. And because of that shared experience, it's altered their plausibility structure. And even though I haven't had the experience, I'm being invited into altering my plausibility structure to accept their very difficult to believe idea. Now, how many people do you think it would take before you'd reach a tipping point? Well, that's incredibly personal. It probably changes person to person. But somewhere between 7 people and 50 people would certainly be enough. You would hit a point where you'd be like, okay, all these people are talking about having this experience, and they seem to be willing to invite me to go on the next outing. Do I go? Now, perhaps you can see the implications to evangelism. This is one of the places where I come out and make some, pretty old advice, but I give you a new reason to accept it. Inviting people to church is a really good idea. If you want your friend to believe in Jesus, then leading them to a group of people who all have a shared plausibility structure that accepts the resurrection is a really good move. getting them into a small group or a micro group where you can share intimately about the experiences that you've had with him, that's an even better idea, because the reconstruction of plausibility structures is foundational to evangelism. What we are asking people to do is to accept a story that is at least as crazy to most modern thinking people as the idea that you went with aliens to a distant moon. That idea at least has a whole lot of sci-fi reinforcing it, making it, while fantastic and implausible, seem like, well, yeah, but maybe it's not entirely crazy. But this one is this idea that there was a guy in the 1st century who was raised by a carpenter and who turned to be a religious teacher and provoked the establishment of the religious community of his day, to the point where they decided that it would be better if he didn't live anymore. And they put him on trial for his life. And since they didn't have the power to execute him, they turned him over to people that did, with charges that they would understand, because their charges, their religious ideas wouldn't provoke the Romans to do what they did, but the idea of insurrection would. So they turned him over under different charges. They got the Romans involved, and the Romans put that guy to death. And then he came back to life. The Romans, who are experts at killing people and ending their lives, they did that, and they were sure he was dead. They gave him over to those first people to bury him again, and he was buried. And then a couple days later, his grave was empty. Now, even in the ancient world, the plausibility structures were such that the church needed to come up with an answer to the more plausible explanation, which is that there was grave robbery involved, that his body was stolen, because that's something that can happen and that everyone can understand. But what we're doing right now is we're doing something that challenges the plausibility structures of just about everybody. That a dead man came back to life, and that becomes then proof that he's something more than human, that he is human, entirely human, but also divine. And as such, he's king of the universe. And he looks at every person and says, I'm your king, you're mine, you belong to me. Are you willing to be my subject, or do you want to continue in your rebellion? That's a pretty implausible story to people who don't already believe it. If you believe that story, it all makes perfect sense. You heard it and you went, yeah. Because you've had experiences with that guy. You've had experiences by his spirit in worship and in personal prayers that you've seen answered. It all makes sense to you because you've made the trip. You've journeyed to that moon, and you came back with a story that your friend doesn't yet believe. But if you can be a part of a group of people who, on the one hand, are not crazy, and on the other hand, they all believe this very difficult to believe idea, then the group begins to work on the plausibility structure of the people involved. Realize this is human nature. It is part of the design of human beings. And because of that, plausibility structures work no matter what idea you throw at them. It's why people in all of these cultures across the world believe things that are so different from what you and I believe. And if you go to Africa or Central America or to China, they believe things that are very different from what you and I believe. It's because their plausibility structures tell them what is real. And these things work when you become a part of a group that resocializes you. That's why cults are dangerous, because cults reconstruct your plausibility structures around lies. The plausibility structure is only as good as the group that builds it. And the truth that it's built on is only as good as the truth that it rests on. I don't know that's kind of a tautology. What I mean is that the gospel is true because God is behind it. And since this is God's story, then I can have really high levels of confidence that, this is true. But every false narrative, every false religion, they're all accepting those things because their plausibility structures allow them to do it. What we're doing when we are doing evangelism is we're bringing someone into contact with a very difficult to believe story. And we do that together as a group so that they have a better chance of reorienting the stuff that's been wired into them by the world, so that they can come to believe differently. They can come to accept this very difficult story. It's kind of what we've been sent in the world to do. Because God so loved the world that he sent Jesus. And Jesus sent us for the honor of Christ and for the life of the world.